joining us for the 4 o'clock news and politics show, and we've got a good one for you. Very hard to top Molly O'Brien at 3 o'clock, though, having in penguins from Mystic Aquarium, our friend Jeremy Duffy from Isle Brewers, and a great lineup, so be sure to check that out if you haven't had the chance to already. But I'm very excited to welcome in my first guest in. This is Dr. Will Bundy with the U.S. Naval War College. Served in the Navy for more than 30 years prior to returning to the college as a faculty member. He has led warfighting concept development and advanced research projects that have been deployed by both in the fleet and the Joint Force. Now, we have seen this week the DARPA did go through the final training, trials of Sea Hunter, which is the largest unmanned Navy ship, and we're going to have Dr. Bundy in to talk about it. Thanks for coming in today, sir.
It's good to be here.
I appreciate it because we've got the top experts in the world at the Naval War College.
Thank you very much.
And I said, who can I talk with Sea Hunter about? And people said, you must talk to Dr. Bundy. So talk with us about your knowledge of this and how this came to fruition from concept to where we are today.
We have an organization entitled DARPA. It's an acronym for developmental organization. They are funded to look at technology and capabilities that can be used in the military. And so some years ago, they started a process, as a matter of fact, online, of a model of a ASW continuous track unmanned vehicle. And they provided that to individuals who could go online and play with this game. And the game was set up so that you would have this unmanned system follow a submarine around. And we had a number of people do that. It was completely available to the public. We got a lot of information back about how it might operate. I guess it was kind of crowdsourcing an idea about this ACTUV. Later on, money was dedicated to build a prototype, and the prototype is about 180 feet long.
Okay.
I was on board Sea Hunter about a year and a half ago in San Diego. The idea is that the ship can carry any number of payloads. Payload is a capability that we can use. For instance, in the open press here recently, we talked about a towed parachute that you can put a sensor in and tow it from the back of a ship. And that was one of the tests that was conducted with the Sea Hunter. In addition to that, the idea is to use unmanned surface vessels, unmanned undersea vessels, much the way oil companies use unmanned, remotely controlled vessels that go under the sea. And the idea is dull, dirty, right? And dangerous work can be done by machines that do not have people on board. And we operate them in a couple of different ways. First of all, many are familiar with the aircraft that we put up, and they are operated remotely. So there is a pilot and others, and I'm sure some of the audience has seen the movies around that about using unmanned aircraft to do surveillance, and in fact, use them in armed conflict. And so those are operated by a person that can communicate with that unmanned system. We call that a person in the loop, or man in the loop in our language. And then there are our systems that we have where there is a person on the loop. So it's somebody who programs this unmanned system and sends it out to do a mission. So with the ACTUV surface vessel, the key that we had to really understand is how do you operate within the international laws of navigation. The coal rigs, we call that. It's the ability not to have our unmanned system collide with another vessel. And there's some basic rules about that, about the meeting situation, crossing situations, and they are pretty much standard. And you can program computers and sensors to operate within that environment, and that is one of the key factors with the ACTUV or Sea Hunter. The audience will recognize that it is a prototype. It's a test vessel. And so DARPA had it for a number of years. They've just finished some tests to make sure we could operate it at sea in an unmanned environment. That was done successfully. And then a number of payloads, for instance, the towed payload that I just talked about. And now that all of that has been done and it's a proven concept, the Sea Hunter has been turned over to our Office of Naval Research. You can read about that in the paper. The Office of Naval Research is now going to do more testing, really start to understand what payloads can be operated from a large unmanned vessel. And I would suspect that we will build larger unmanned vessels. On the commercial side, their job is to get cargo from one point to another point as quickly as possible and efficiently as possible. And so the commercial shipping industry is also looking at unmanned systems. They can have the luxury of having a very small crew aboard a large ship, and the ship will operate autonomously, semi-autonomously, we might call it, where the crew can see what's going on. If they really need to go to the bridge, they can, but otherwise the ship can navigate on its own. So
the ship can kind of sail itself, and you've been on the Sea Hunter.
Yes, I had the opportunity to visit it and walk around and look under, under the hood, so to speak.
Take a peek underneath.
Yeah.
So you talk about the payload capacity. So is there an amount of space that can be utilized for, and again, no one on it, so they'll put a lot of stuff on.
Yeah, well, there are systems that we can put in the hull, in racks and equipment racks. That's available. It has, of course, its own engine and fuel and that sort of thing. And then there is space above deck. And so if you go online and look at the Sea Hunter as it's designed, there is space forward of the bridge or the pilot house, and then there's space aft that you might be able to put a container with equipment and capability in. And then, of course, you can have a control system ashore that talks to the unmanned vehicle and either operated in a semi-autonomous mode where you tell it to do some things and it does it, and then it comes back and checks in with you, or fully autonomous where you might leave it alone for a significant period of time.
And you talk about the potential to see more of these vessels moving forward, having gone through the DARPA process, and now with the Navy. Is this the future of naval operations?
Yes, if you talk to, we have a Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Unmanned Systems. I've had a chance to work with the Deputy Secretary. And what his office foresees is an integrated Navy,
okay.
In which you have machines that operate either autonomously or fully autonomously or semi-autonomously, and you have manned or vessels with people that operate. And so, as a matter of fact, one of the interesting things to look at is a British design. It's called Dreadnought 2050. And you can look that up, of course, when you're...
The Dreadnought 2050, so
2050,
that's, what are they up to?
Well, that's a very large concept vessel. It operates unmanned air vehicles, unmanned undersea vehicles, and unmanned surface vehicles.
Wow.
And it's a concept. It's all drawings and that sort of thing, but you can imagine what you can do with that for a sea control type operation, and that's the British. They have that idea.
So how much through this process, as we've talked about them going through the trial process, how much do countries sort of keep this new technology close to their vest, so to speak, and then sort of let the rest of the world know that what we're up to?
Well, it's an interesting topic. We talk about technologies and capabilities coming online that one country may have, and they will then start to deploy it. It doesn't take very long for potential adversaries and even partner nations to start to use that same type of technology. Then there's kind of a cycle. So I come along with the aircraft carrier. We build the aircraft carrier capability, and then our partners start to do the same thing. And if we recall back into World War II, the Japanese had a carrier force. As a matter of fact, it was a carrier force that attacked Pearl Harbor. And so this idea of capabilities starting in one country, another country will adopt it, really gets into something we call the revolution in military affairs.
Okay.
And so the revolution is caused by some capability, a longer range rifle, an aircraft carrier. And one of the very interesting approaches around that is the nuclear-powered submarine. And nuclear-powered submarine revolutionized undersea warfare. And so we were able to build Nautilus, and after Nautilus, other nations started to build, their versions of nuclear-powered submarines. So that starts this revolution in military affairs, and so that's kind of the answer to your question.
That is the answer to what happens next. And what happens, Doctor, with these unmanned drones? You talk about them doing sort of the rank and file work of transporting goods and services. Could these be used in warfare? Are these intended to be used with weapons or warfare tactics on board?
Well, we have weapons today that are pretty smart. We talk about homing torpedoes, and so you launch a torpedo and the torpedo can find its target. There are a number of papers out now that talk about the laws of armed conflict and the humanitarian side of warfare. What's humane? What is it that we should do? The idea of a weapon system or a unmanned system engaging in detect to engage another or an adversary has been debated quite a bit. And there are discussions about whether or not we ought to do that. And so there are proponents who argue there ought to always be a person in the loop to make critical decisions. Others believe that there are to be people on the loop, and that you send a system out semi-autonomously or autonomously, where you have a level of control, but you're not actually a remote control environment. So that is a discussion that is going on. The idea of cognitive computing, people think about artificial intelligence. I always start that conversation with something called intelligent agent technology, and it's really building technology, digital technology, cognitive technology that allows a machine to understand what it is supposed to do. And I use the term understand, which is kind of human, but you program
AI.
it. That's right. You program it. It is an intelligent agent of a human being, and that machine will do what you tell it to do. Now, the key is assurance, that you put that system in play. You have to test it. You want to make sure that the commanders and operators who own those systems are fully aware what the system would do, and they build trust and confidence in those systems. And so as we start to bring more autonomy into the private sector, more autonomy into the military, a number of those questions will be resolved. I would tell your viewers, one of the more interesting things to look at is Kevin Kelly's book. It's called The Inevitables. He talks about a period in our future called Technium, in which you and I and others will really depend on our technology. And today, we depend on it quite a bit, don't we? Smartphones, keeping track of things, Right now, you can talk to your car, tell it where you want to go by city and by state and city and address, and it will then tell you the right and left turns to make and what the distances are. We also have the next steps for fully autonomous vehicles, in that you have cruise controls that allow you to operate, and the car will slow down when you're starting to get too close to a car ahead of you. They will operate and keep you in the correct lane. And of course, you've seen the cars that park themselves. And
Yes.
so these technologies are, are fast approaching, and we're going to depend on them a lot in our future lives. And so that idea is called Technium. And so for those that do a lot of reading, there's a Dan Brown book out today, and it's called Origin. And I would suggest that your viewers, get a copy of that, or you can get it on Audible. Some people take that approach. And I want you to meet one of the characters, and the character's name is Winston, like Winston Churchill.
Indeed.
Okay, and
I've read Origin.
Oh, you have. All right. So then you know where we're headed with this.
Yes.
Without telling everybody, I want.
It's a great read.
Yeah.
So The Inevitables, read Origin, and then again, I appreciate your coming in and breaking it down for people as to what you see. These headlines, you see largest unmanned ship going now to the Navy after the trial period. And we've got the best minds at the Naval War College right here down in Newport that we're able to get up here in the studio and give us some context. So I appreciate your taking the time to come in. And hopefully we'll have you back soon.
Well,
okay.
Be glad to.
Dr. Bundy, I appreciate your time.
Okay.
We'll let you around the corner, back down to Newport. Have a safe journey back.
Okay.
Okay, I appreciate it. Dr. Will Bundy with the Naval War College. You might have seen the news this week of Sea Hunter, the Department of Defense's Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, just completed its trials of Sea Hunter, this largest unmanned vessel. It was great to get Dr. Bundy in here to get his take on it. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with our next guest in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center.